Penn State football just keeps taking losses on the recruiting trail, and now they have one less quarterback in the class of 2026.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are locked on to Penn State football recruiting, or once again, lack thereof. And thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Sako, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Peyton Falzone committed to the class of 2026, no longer as the Auburn Tigers surprisingly flip him. And I do mean surprisingly here. So Penn State recruiting just continues to spiral. There are more concerns here than initially meet the eye. We're also going to talk about the QB room outlook to wrap things up. I want to begin with the flip itself, the news. So this was not expected. Asking around, everybody was surprised. And when I mean everybody, I truly mean everybody. Auburn sources, my counterpart, Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn, had no idea this was happening. This wasn't in the works. So both Penn State and Auburn sources alike were completely surprised by this move. That Falzone, in-state prospect, was the second quarterback in this class of 2026. And initially I said, hey, it's going to be difficult to keep two quarterback prospects like this. Don't be surprised if Troy Hune ends up being the one to flip. Well, we all got surprised because it ends up being Peyton Falzone. And there is a reason for that after gathering information here. I say this is a massive loss. Other people express disagreement, and I don't blame them because Falzone is a very raw prospect, and he truly a raw prospect. He's still a 4-star. Insane athleticism, arm strength, athletic ability. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. In the way that he moves, you can see why Penn State was initially recruiting him as a tight end, just because of how athletically gifted he is, but continued to chip away at the quarterback mechanics. He wants to be a quarterback in college, and Penn State was taking him as a quarterback. So there were discrepancies in all of that. What was Penn State's plan? Is Falzone even a quarterback? Because if you ask one person, they would say, no, Falzone's not going to be a QB in college objectively. That's not a subjective thing. That is an objective thing, meaning that he's just not good enough. He's not going to play there because he's not good enough. But Penn State did at least recruit him as a quarterback, was going to put him on a developmental plan. And his ceiling was, I think, endless. I think sky was truly the limit for Falzone, and Auburn clearly saw that. So losing Falzone as an in-state player, it kind of reminds me, Matt Zollers was extremely more polished, but you can see the parallels there between losing an in-state quarterback prospect with all the potential in the world. Even though Zollers was a 5-star, Falzone was a 4-star that had a lot of room to grow, and Auburn saw that. I think Auburn also probably played into the fact that at some point that the dam was going to burst open, I think, because keeping two quarterbacks in this day and age of college football is extremely difficult, but as Penn State kind of talked about it, there was other intel that says, hey, this is going to work out. And we're going to get to more of the quarterback room now, how it changes with Falzone out of the equation, but also talking about what it would have looked like and why Penn State wanted to take two quarterbacks here and if they still should. So it's a lot of projection. It's a lot of potential. But if Penn State hit on this commitment, Falzone does have that kind of talent where he just really needs to refine the quarterback mechanics. And if you want to be a quarterback, yes, you have to be good at the mechanics, but he has the arm strength, he has the velocity, he has the work ethic, the willingness to learn and adapt, because he's a much better quarterback prospect than he was 6 months ago, for example. but it was going to be difficult for Penn State to do this. He's going to be a quarterback at Auburn. Auburn didn't flip him with the intention of, well, we'll convert him to tight end or a jumbo wide receiver or something like that. No, he will be a quarterback at the next level, despite what the naysayers have to say. So in my opinion, I think this is a big loss because of the ability that I think he has with his untapped potential. I do think he can be a really good quarterback at the next level, but it's going to take he's not going to be ready to go in a year or two. This is by the year 3, he needs to be able to turn the corner. In the day and age of the transfer portal, never rule out Falzone potentially transferring back to Penn State. Who knows? Let me address the Auburn issue here, because he had no prior connections to Auburn. So it begs the question, loyalty and the recruitment, NIL, what was he offered? I don't have anything official that, hey, I know what Auburn offered in terms of NIL, but I do know that it was greater than what Penn State was offering. And that's the other lingering issue here, is the fact that Auburn can make a quick phone call and solicit a commitment, a flip, just like that. No resistance, no nothing. So at some point, Penn State, do they need to start reassessing their game plan here with the way that they're recruiting? Because this was a little bit too easy. Without hesitation, Falzone flipped. And that's why it caught a lot of us in the media off guard, because no one expected it. Without hesitation, Falzone's an Auburn Tiger. Brian Smith covers Auburn. He's localized in that area, recruiting expert here for the network, but he is localized to Auburn. He had no idea. Zach Blackerby had no idea. My counterparts had truly no idea, and they're plugged in about Auburn football here. So Auburn flips for the second time in 2 consecutive recruitments. They flip Alvin Henderson, which that's not the same, but there is a little bit of a streak here with Alvin Henderson, the running back. I think Penn State fans maybe forget about that. I certainly did. I had to remind myself, oh yeah, Auburn did this a cycle ago, but that was an Alabama native in Henderson. And I think at some point we all knew he was going to flip. This one completely catches everybody off guard. I do think there is a case for Penn State to get 2 quarterbacks in this cycle, and we'll talk about that more and these recruiting issues that do continue. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Have you ever decided at the last minute that you wanted to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and suddenly you realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. And with the money you save on tickets, you can now splurge that on food, drinks, merchandise, or even invite a bigger group of friends to come with you. Gametime makes all of that possible, and Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer as you get to game time, as you get to first pitch for baseball season here, now that it's summer. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And if you're interested in Penn State football tickets, you can get those ahead of time. They are available now on Gametime. And if you've never been to a venue, those clear seat views are truly a game changer, where you can see just what your point of view would look like ahead of time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Redeem code LOCKED COLLEGE LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we'll pick back up with the quarterback room outlook and just the recruiting issues that, I mean, I guess it's because of the recency bias, but Penn State continues to see its recruiting spiral out of control here. But the class of 2026 is still solid. It's just the continued miss after miss after miss. And now you get hit with a flip. I also want to preface the fact that Brian Smith and I actually recorded a reaction to these recruiting losses before Falzone decommitted and flipped to the Auburn Tigers. So I do want to preface that for tomorrow's show that now it's dated, because hours before we had our conversation, and then that news hits the headlines. Quarterback room, though. Penn State wanted, I think they need 2 quarterbacks in this cycle. Probably not going to happen now. Falzone was again, high potential, high upside quarterback recruit. And I will stand by that take. Even though people do question his ability, I think with the work ethic, with the training, you can be that good. He has things that you can't teach, the skill set. He at least has the intangibles that you can't teach. You can teach somebody to play quarterback. We saw that with Drew Allar. Drew Allar was a raw, unrefined prospect, became a 5-star. I'm not arguing that Falzone's going to become a 5-star, but he can still be a late riser in these recruiting rankings. Penn State still has Troy Hune. If this went from 1 to 0, if Peyton Falzone was your QB commit, and then you went to 0, then the sirens, the red alerts, they would be all over the place here. Penn State at least had the insurance of, 2 quarterbacks, which I addressed earlier. That, hey, Penn State has 2 quarterbacks, so if they do happen to lose one, well, at least they have one. They still have the one, and it is Troy Hune. He is a California native. I'm not trying to imply anything. Just know that, that was a difficult recruitment that they did win initially. He's all the way on the other side of the country. From what I've heard, he is completely locked in. And for what it was worth, Peyton Falzone was locked in too. He was going to camps. He wasn't taking a lot of other visits. Auburn made a phone call and made it worth his while. So as for the quarterback room, why this Falzone flip hurts is because Drew Allar is going to leave after the season. You have a quarterback battle between Jaxon Smolik and Ethan Grunkemeyer beyond just the backup job this season. This is laying the groundwork for spring football. One of them will transfer. Most people are going to say that it's Ethan Grunkemeyer that will stay and Jaxon Smolik will be the one to transfer out. So be it. But I'm not going to guarantee you that Grunkemeyer ends up winning that QB battle. I think Jaxon Smolik deserves a chance and prove. But right now, think if the depth chart was released tomorrow, if this was Nevada tomorrow, it would be Drew Allar, Jaxon Smolik, and Ethan Grunkemeyer in that order. It's close. I'm not saying there's not a lot that's set, but that's my point, is that there's not a lot that separates Smolik and Grunkemeyer. With that being said, the quarterback that loses that QB1 battle in spring ball next year in 2026 is going to transfer. They are not going to stay as a backup. In theory, could Penn State potentially try to make it worth their while in terms of NIL? Perhaps. That's on the table. This isn't a 100% guarantee because of this day and age. But if Bo Pribula was going to transfer out, then you very well believe that Jaxon Smolik or Ethan Grunkemeyer will transfer out and go start somewhere else if they do not win the job at Penn State. So your QB room for 2026 now looks like the winner of Smolik versus Grunkemeyer. The loser is no longer there. Beckham Kritza and Troy Hune. That's your 3-deep quarterback depth chart. Falzone gave you security, insurance, and now you have less of that. Hune is a really good quarterback prospect. I'm glad that he is right now in Penn State's quarterback room, and I have to be very careful how I preface these things because at the end of the day, you never know. That's not a jab at Hune. That's just kind of a jab at college football because, like I said, none of us were expecting Falzone to flip. So in the instance of all of this, the QB room just loses certainty. You're losing a starting quarterback. You're going to lose somebody else to the transfer portal in this circumstance, which leaves you with a first-year starter, a second-year backup, and a first-year backup, and other walk-on quarterbacks. But again, the house settlement, how's the roster going to work out? There aren't really any other quarterback prospects in this class of 2026 that are going to flip immediately to Penn State and be a second QB. You could go with the Drew Allar, Bo Pribula scenario where Bo Pribula is a really underrated 3-star, kind of goes through that development period. Penn State might try to do that. But again, good luck convincing somebody to be a second QB. It just kind of goes back to this string of losses that Penn State has seen on the recruiting trail here to Notre Dame, to Michigan. There are some other ones that just kind of those one-off ones. Drew Evers recently on the offensive line to SMU, for example. And I just went on the record with Brian for a different episode beforehand. Hey, at least Penn State doesn't see decommitments routinely. That's still technically true, but right on the heels of this, that looks like a pathetic take. So I'll own that one. I'm not even going to try to edit that out. They still don't see decommitments all of the time and flips like that. That is true, but I just think it's ironic that I point that out and then boom, you have a decommitment from Falzone, and a pretty important one. I think that he was an extremely important prospect, whether you had question marks about his overall ability. I think his potential was sky high. However, it's not going to be at Penn State. It's going to be at Auburn. And Auburn, I don't know, has a clearer outlook at quarterback as well after that. I don't know that they picked up a 5-star QB last cycle. They have a quarterback that still has 2 years of eligibility. So Falzone's joining a quarterback room that I think has a similar trajectory as Penn State's in terms of, okay, what's the other competition look like? You're still going to have to wait your turn. Auburn just looks like they made it worth more of his while to spend his time there as opposed to at Penn State. It goes back to Penn State does have NIL issues at this time. Are they systematic, or is this just they're going to take a hit in the 2026 cycle because of how much money they spent retaining this roster? I will still put my hat on that once those NIL bills are covered, once those receipts are taken care of, that 2027 and beyond will be in a better situation with NIL. But at this time, it's still going to be very wild West-esque because the House settlement is not officially in place. There still really aren't any rules. So these teams are going to take advantage of that in the meantime. That's how we're going to summarize it here. Not ideal. Penn State fortunately has Troy Hune in the fold, so they can overcome this, but it certainly doesn't help them. That is where we will finish things up here on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, appreciate your thoughts down in the comments section. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. So for more conversations around all your favorite Penn State sports teams, whether it's football recruiting, wrestling, basketball, you name it, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.